Intuition, gang rape, out-of-body experiences, all this and more right now.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.
Hello, friends. I'm David Pasqualone, and welcome to this week of the podcast, The Susan Jane Story. This week, you're going to hear Susan's remarkable journey from being a young woman that got gang raped while on holiday to her passing out and having what you'd call an out-of-body experience a year later. And then she talks about her journey through life into a marriage with an abusive alcoholic husband, and then finding her way by following her intuition that God put in her. So some of the topics we talk about are outside of our knowledge and comfort zone, but it is very interesting and very beneficial to our lives. So listen through the whole show. Contact Susan at the end if you have any questions, and let me know how and what we can do to better serve you. Our only two priorities and goals of this show is to honor God and to help you and grow. So that's it. So we love you. Enjoy this episode of the podcast. Susan is an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, an author, a coach, and as you can see, she's super easy to talk to, all the way from Australia. So at this time, enjoy the Susan Jane story. Hey, Susan, how are you today?
I'm absolutely wonderful. Thank you for having me on the show, David.
Oh, I am so excited to have you. It's been a long time since we first spoke, and I was just telling our listeners a little bit about you, and they're pumped to hear your episode. So thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. We have been going backwards and forwards quite a bit, haven't we?
Yes.
With all things happening, yes.
Yeah, between the time zone difference and Susan's in Australia, ladies and gentlemen, we're over in Pensacola, Florida, and with the beauty and magic of the internet, we're here today for all of us, right?
Absolutely.
So now, Susan, we're going to get to hear your story, and we're going to glean a bunch of knowledge and truths that we can apply to our lives. And like our listeners know, whether it's their first episode or they've listened to all 170 plus episodes over the last 3 years, they know that we're going to stop along the way and not just talk about what you overcame and achieved in life, but we're going to break it down to practical steps so they can too. Before we start, though, in this episode, if there's one thing our listeners are going to get that you're like, listen to the whole episode, hang with us, you're going to get this piece of knowledge. What is a central theme of this episode that you're going to bring today?
Well, the central theme is really about trusting your gut, trusting your intuition. That is really the central theme. And it's easier said than done a lot of the time. And I'm hoping to be able to give you some hints and ideas and ways that you can learn to actually trust your gut, trust what your intuition is saying, and follow that.
Yes, and that's something we all need, because when we trust Christ our Savior, it says the Holy Spirit comes inside of you and you have an unction from the Holy One, you know all things. But between the intuition God gave us, the Holy Ghost, and just the gifts he's given us, some people are just naturally inclined for some intuition, confidence, right? We don't believe in ourselves, so we don't trust our gut. So this is huge for most people, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we talk about the terminology, it's, to me, it's all the same. It's just we're using different terminology, and people will use God, you use Holy Spirit, they'll use the different terminology, but really I boil it right down to the basics. So whatever terms you add to that, we understand the basics of it. And that's what I really like.
Awesome. So let's do this. Susan, you were born, you grew up, the highs, the lows, the everything in between made you who you are today. And somewhere along the line, this mission and message became really important in your life. So let's start at the foundation. Where were you born? What was your upbringing like? Father, mother, brothers, sisters, good, bad, ugly. What was your origin story?
Okay, so I was born in England. and I was 2.5 when I came to Australia. So by then I was the one, two, three, fourth child, the baby. Mum was 6 months pregnant with number 5. And we packed up England and we moved to Australia, into Victoria. I still take my hat off to my mother, who could have possibly done that. Like, that is phenomenal, to actually leave your hometown, leave all your family, have 4 children and be 6 months pregnant and come to a completely different world. So I really admire my mum to be able to do that. And yes, Dad was part of it too, but I just really admire my mum for it. So I came over here. I ended up being one of 8 children, and we were—
Wow, that's a huge family. That's awesome.
Yes, it is. Yes. I can't answer anything to that one because I wasn't involved in that side of it. But yes.
Well, growing up, you either hear kids say, I love being part of a big family, or I hated it. So in your story, I know you'll share it. So what was it like growing up? Keep going.
Well, actually, growing up, I liked being part of the big family because I didn't have a lot of friends. I'm quite introverted, so I didn't have a lot of friends. So you had the friends within the family, but in part of that aspect, one of my older sisters was quite a bully. Now, I didn't know that. This was just life and how you live and how you get through it. And it wasn't until I became a little bit older in high school and getting past the going into work and everything else, that I realized that I didn't like being controlled or manipulated under those conditions. And so at the ripe old age of 21, I left home and started traveling around Australia.
Nice. Now, when you did this, was that something that was acceptable to your family and common in your region of the country? Or was this like, whoa, she's going on her own and exploring?
Well, it was common for the time for people to do that. It was like your gap year, I think you call it. So it was common in that sort of aspect, but not— the family weren't happy, no. And it's funny, it's not until Mum, and we lost Mum sadly at Christmas this year, but it wasn't until we were at that stage that she turned around and said she only had one regret, and that was— oh, excuse me, I'm getting emotional. And that was, I left home and didn't come back.
Yeah. And that's not your fault. You had your own path, but it's hard.
But I needed it. I needed to find me. I needed to see who I was and what I was doing. So it was really, really important I did that. And sorry, the tears are because, like I said, we've only just recently lost Mum. But I needed to do that. That was really, really important for me. I couldn't— as much as I loved having the big family as I was growing up, I needed to find my space. I had to come out from under that umbrella and open up a lot more. But before, some of the things that happened in the lead up to me leaving home was quite relevant to it. So, and quite relevant to my story and my past, because at the age of 19, I went on a holiday with my sister, younger sister, and we went to the Gold Coast, which is where I'm living now, funny enough. And it was a particular time there. My younger sister had gone home. I was heading back to the unit where we were staying, and I had a tap on the shoulder. I turned around and I was punched, king head, hit the ground, didn't come to until I was being dragged into the back of a car by my hair. So this then became a pack rape, and it was during that time in this situation that something happened to me that was so extraordinary and so weird is the technical term, I think, so weird that I never spoke about it, never talked about it. So when I was being attacked, I actually left my body. So the spirit side of us, the side that's attached to God, to the greater universe, to everything else, the spiritual side of me, that spirit side of me left the body, and I stood outside the car, however spirits stand, and I watched what was happening. And when I talk about the situation, I tend to talk about it in a manner that is— I talk about her, she, because it didn't feel like me. It was a shell. It was a person, but it didn't feel like me. I was standing on the outside. And I remember being there Oh, actually, before I actually happened, I remember going, and like I'm not a strong religious person, but I remember saying, thank God it's me and not my younger sister this is happening to. That was number one. And then I thought to myself, I can't stop them doing what they're going to do. I hope I get out of this alive, but I can't stop them from doing what they're doing to me. Can I stop them doing it to somebody else? And that was my biggest question. And I asked that question. That was one of the things. How can I stop them doing this to somebody else? And that was the instant that I left the body. And I was then watching what was going on. And it's very, very strange when you're looking at it. And like I said, I didn't share this story with anyone for a long, long time because it didn't make sense to me. I looked at her face and there was blood coming down the side of her lip, but I couldn't taste anything. You could see the energy coming out of the side of her mouth where she'd been punched in the face. And it's like that radiating energy. You could see that. You could see the energy on the back of her head where she was pulled into the car. You could see energy coming out of other areas where she had been being attacked, punched, hit, and things like that. You could see all of this coming from this body. You could see this energy happening. And I just remember looking at it, and there was no emotional attachment to it, no emotional attachment. It was just like, that's happening. That's what it is. No biggie. This is just what's going on. So you felt very, very distant. And I know they talk about when you can look at something from the third party, and that's exactly what I was, that third party. And I remember looking at it, and I got the answer to the question I asked, which I didn't even realize I was asking a question, because I was like, how can I stop them doing this? How can I stop them doing it to someone else? And as I've got this answer, I've come back into the body. And now coming back into the body, you could feel everything. The pain came through. You could taste the blood. You could smell the cigarettes and the alcohol that was in the car. Everything came back. All those 5 senses came back in one big foul swoop. So I've come back into my body. And as I said, I'm not a religious person, but my answer came through and I started to do it. Now, the answer was to pray for them. And I only knew 2 prayers. So I started the first one, and it was, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. That was the only thing I knew. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. And I said it out loud, not quietly to start with. Then I got louder and louder, and I kept repeating it. They didn't like it. They would punch me more, hit me more. Eventually I kept on going because I refused to stop, because that was the only thing I could do. The only thing I could think of was to forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Forgive them, Lord, for that. And it got louder and it got louder and it got louder until the hand came over the mouth and the nose, and I couldn't breathe. Another hand came around the neck, and that's when I thought I wasn't going to survive this. I passed out and came to on the side of the road, left in the gutter. So that was my first experience as leaving my body. That was my very first experience. And of course, I didn't understand it. I didn't know what was going on. It just did not make sense to me. I just didn't get it. So I didn't talk about it. It was just something you didn't talk about. And in fact, I didn't talk much about the attack in any way, shape or form. I didn't get counselling, didn't have anything like that. That wasn't on the cards in those days. So I had to deal with that the best way I could deal with that. And I did that. And I'm not saying I did it the best way that could be done. I did the best way for me. And so that went on, and almost tell me if you want to ask a question or anything too, David. Sorry if I'm rattling too much.
No, I'm not going to interrupt you. You keep telling your story, and I write notes down, and I'll go back and ask. So I don't want to interrupt your energy and your
flow.
Order. Yeah, your flow. So
after the attack, almost 12 months to the day, I was at work and I worked in a bank, and I started feeling really sick. Now, I didn't know what was going on. And one of the other ladies, one of the other staff members sort of went, oh, you don't look well. I've obviously gone really pale. And she started to help me up the stairs to the lunchroom. And I remember hearing her just yelling, I can't hold her, she's too heavy. And I was obviously passing out at the time. So they've obviously taken me up to the lunchroom. Now, up in the lunchroom, all I knew was we had a little tables and chairs up there, and that was it, you know, your little tea and coffee stuff. But I distinctly remember I was laying down. There was nothing to lay down on that I knew, but I was laying down. And I remember everybody was looking at me. Now, again, I had passed out, so I didn't know. And then all of a sudden, I stood up. Now, it wasn't obviously my physical body standing up. It was my spirit again, leaving the body and standing up. And I remember thinking, why are you all looking down? I'm up here. And I started traveling up. And I experienced this, what I now know to be a near-death experience. Now, I didn't understand it again. I didn't understand what it was, didn't speak much about it. So I went up. Well, I believe I went up because, you know, I was saying, why aren't you looking at me? And they're all looking down. And I went through this series of, it's quite strange because you have a knowing that there's a path in front of you, but you can't see it. And you have a knowing that there's a wall in front of you, like a divider in front of you, but you can't see it. You can't see it to see it, if that makes sense. You just feel it, you know it. So I'm going down this path, and again, I know I'm going to go down here, and yet there was this just vastness. I don't know why I didn't walk right or left. I just kept on going down this way. And I was watching this sort of mist turn into like sparkles, like confetti, like glitter. And then in this glitter, it became darker and became little squares, little shapes. Now, I'm talking when I was 20 years old. There was no mobile phones in those days. There was nothing like that. These ended up being like little, I call them little TV screens, but you would say nowadays that wasn't like a mobile phone. So these little TV screens, I remember looking at these little screens and going, oh, the story that was playing, the TV show, was my life. It was little moments of my life. And I was looking at them on these little screens. And I kept on going down to the end. And not down to the end. I just kept on walking, and I knew I could feel this wall was up here. There was and I'm not going to call it a gate because it doesn't look like a gate, but it was an opening to go into the next section. So I got to this, I could see the opening, and I could see all these people looking around the corner of the wall, for want of another word, but there was people. I could see not shadows, but like the silhouettes of people. And they were my people. I don't know who they were, but they were my people. They were friends. They were love. You know, it was just so nice that the colors that were happening, you weren't colors of this world. The sounds that you were hearing weren't sounds of this world. Everything was so very, very just, it was love with that you could see or feel or know. But the people were going, why is she here? What's she doing? What's going on? And there was lots of questions. That all of a sudden, all this busyness came in. It was like the love that was there had become busy. And it was like, no, that's not, something's not right. Something's not right. And it wasn't a bad negative. It was just, no, that's not right. And then I didn't hear a voice. I just sort of felt that, no, you've got to go back. And then I came to at work, and they'd found a banana lounge, which was in the cupboard I didn't know about. And that's what I was laying on, a banana lounge, which I didn't have any idea to. That was the second time. The third time I left my body was done deliberately. Now, after I had the near-death experience, it was probably about 12 years later that I saw a book on near-death experiences, and I thought, oh, gee, that sounds interesting. I wonder what that is. And it wasn't until I started reading that book that I realised what mine was. I didn't know what I was experiencing at that time. So it sort of was like, oh, it was probably just a dream. It probably didn't mean anything. But when I read this book about near-death experiences, and this person had written, I think, about 6 different cases and experiences that they'd written about, and bits of each of them were relevant to what I'd witnessed or what I had experienced. That's when I realized it was a near-death experience. That's when I realized what was going on with the attack as well, what had happened in the attack. So things started to make a little bit more sense. And I thought, okay, if we have got 2 bodies, we've got a physical body and we've got a spiritual body, can we do this deliberately? Can we leave our body? Can we allow our spirit to move out, enjoy, and come back, or do something like that? And that's when I read the book about astral traveling, and that's when I did it deliberately. So it was probably about another 20 years later. I deliberately practiced for about 6 months. I'm a theory tester too, David. I like to test theories. So if I'm reading something, if I'm reading a self-help book, if anybody's reading my books, I would say test them. Don't just accept it, because there's so many different ways and so many different things out there in this world that we need to test them and see if they suit us. So with this astral traveling, I decided to test the theory. If this was true and if that's what had happened to me, I want to test the theory. So it probably took about 6 months of me. I'd go to bed and I'd say, okay, I'd like to astral travel tonight. What can I do? Where can I go? What does that look like? And one particular night, I did it. And I know I did it because it felt so different. I was on my driveway and I was heading out of my driveway, and I was above my driveway heading out. And I knew I was doing it. And as soon as you put that emotional energy with it, straight back into the body, it just does not work. And that's how I realized that when I had the attack, why I wasn't feeling any emotions to it, because its emotions are the actual energy between the two. So we have feelings and we have emotions. Feelings are what we feel internally, that's coming from our spirit. And that's some of the signs and some of the understandings that we can have. Why I'm feeling this way? Why is my gut feeling that way? What am I feeling? Emotions are the energy that we put externally. It's how we deal with that feeling. So I've got this feeling, and it could be, I'm feeling a little bit down, and then the emotion could turn out to be angry. So the emotion isn't always the same as the feeling. And so the emotion is the physical side of the body, and the feeling is the spiritual side. And I think I've gone off tangent. Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. I do want to go back a little bit and just make sure we didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
And I have some questions for sure. So, and I like how you describe that, the emotion and the feelings, and the emotion is the spiritual side, you said, correct?
No, the feeling is the spiritual side.
Feeling is
emotion is energy in motion. That is the physical side. That's how we express it.
Gotcha. I'm just taking notes here. So physical expression. Okay. So let's do this. Between your birth and when the gang rape occurred, was there anything we missed in your history that's important or foundational or ties into up to today? Or are we good between your birth and the rape?
There was a few smaller things that happened, and some of them are like dreams. I had one particular dream. I called it the devil came to visit, and this particular dream, and this is why this is my intuition coming through. This is my guidance coming through. So I was having this dream. I would have been 15, around that age group, in my own room. And I had a lot of little fish tanks because I loved fish. So I had these fish tanks. And I had this dream that out of the wall, the devil came. So there was flames, and it was absolutely terrifying. This devil came at me, and I was so frightened, so scared, as you would be when you dream something like that. It was just really in the moment. And I remember forcing myself to wake up because I was so frightened. I forced myself to wake up, I've done that a few more times now, but it was so scary. So I forced myself to wake up, and I've looked over, and one of the power points was sparking for the fish tanks. And so I went over there, and because in a day still, pulled it out of the wall and then went straight back to bed. And to me, that was my intuition, my spirit, my God coming in and saying, I need to wake you up, or there's going to be an issue, because I was on the ground floor, so that I would have lost my whole family. I need to wake you up. And so the spirit created the most dramatic thing to frighten me, to wake me up. And that's when I thanked the devil for coming to visit. Because if it wasn't that, if it was something softer and gentle, I wouldn't have woken up. I wouldn't have forced myself to wake up, to stop dreaming.
Got you.
Yeah.
And then when you were, so was it a single event dream? It wasn't a reoccurring event, correct?
No, single event.
Okay. And then when you were 19, where did you say you were going? Was it like day or night when you got punched?
Oh, we had been out. So we'd on holiday, and we had like a couple of days left. And so we were at this, what do they call it? The beer garden. They had this big beer garden, and you'd go there and you'd have a few drinks. Well, my younger sister went home, and I was sort of going, okay, I was just chatting with some few friends, and then I was heading off too. So I was sort of trying to catch up with her. Not that I could see her. She was quite a distance in front, but I was trying to catch up to her. But I was feeling a little bit down, because it was like, got to go home, don't really want to. So I was sort of scuffling along a little bit and I knew there was a couple behind me because I overtook them. There was a couple, and it was on the main highway, on the main highway in the area. I overtook this couple because they were walking a bit slow, and then I just chugged along. And then when I got the tap on the shoulder, I thought it was the couple. But obviously they had obviously gone into a unit, or, they weren't there. And yeah, that's when I was king hit. So it was evening, but not late, probably around the 7, 8 o'clock.
Yeah. So they were following you or saw you and targeted you. And do you remember
Yes.
about how many there were?
There was 3.
3 of them. And then did you ever report it? Did you tell your parents? Because you're coming home, I'm sure you had bruises and physical damage.
Yes.
What did you tell your family when what happened?
I didn't report it there because I was on holidays, didn't know where anything was. When I got home, when Mum and Dad picked us up from the airport, and Dad said to me, "Oh, you look a lot better. You put a bit of weight on, which is nice, around my face." Well, that was the swelling. And I sort of didn't say too much. I was quiet. And then my younger sister said, "No, you've got to tell them. You've got to tell them." So I did, because after the attack, and I came to on the side of the road, I went back to the unit, and then I remember I'd lost my shoe in the event, and I remember going back to the unit, and I was having a shower, because you're trying to clean everything off you, and you're doing what you can to clean it off you. My sister, I don't know why I was worried about my shoe. I lost my shoe. You know how we just focus on things just so you're
in shock and not thinking.
Yeah, so you can cope through it. Anyway, so I didn't even know that. She'd gone out to find my shoe and found it in the gutter and brought it back. I didn't know that. By the time she came back, which was it could have been a good half hour, by then I had found the nail brush, and I was scrubbing myself. And when she came in, she just took the nail brush, because I was basically bleeding all down my arms and down my legs, because I was scrubbing myself so much, trying to get rid of the situation. So, yeah, I ended up saying it to Mum and Dad. Now, what had happened was, there was not long before, a couple of years prior to this, there was this big case in Victoria where there was an attack, and the girl had to prove that she was attacked. yeah, so she had to go through all the courts and had to prove it all. There was the photos, all the rest of it. Well, by then I'd had showers. I'd, been a few days later. So there was not so much of the telltale signs apart from a puffy face. So there wasn't that aspect to it. Mum contacted the police and they said, no, you'd have to go back up to Queensland, report it up there and do it all up there. And I just didn't want to do it. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go through it all again because you have to relive it all. And I didn't want to do that. That was not something I wanted to do. And I'm not saying that's for everyone, but I just couldn't do it at that stage. There'd been so much negative press about things like that I couldn't do it. There was a case, only a case that happened just after that, and her name's Anita Cobby. Her name was Anita Cobby, and the same thing happened to her. She was attacked by 3 people, but she was murdered and left. So there was so much going on in that situation. There was a lot of me feeling almost guilty for it being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There was a lot of other areas to it that I just wasn't prepared to go that way.
Yeah, and that's sadly all too common. I mean,
it is.
It's terrible. And it doesn't matter if you're from Australia or America or China.
Yeah.
It's these things happen and they're horrible and the people will get what's due them. But, like you said, the first thing you want to do is take a shower. Well, in today's society,
that's the worst thing to do if you have to prove that you've got,
exactly. But I mean, I can't even imagine like what you and other women and men have gone through. First thing you want to do is instinctively jump in the shower. And it's like, no, you need to wait 48 hours so we can collect evidence. Come on. It's just so hard.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Between that instance, you said you didn't get counseling. I'm guessing, there was trauma and differences and fear, or did you just block it out? What avenue, the emotion and the feelings like we discussed are going to come out of us, but how did it materialize in your life after that?
Yeah. So the first thing that happened too when I got home was Mum took me to the doctors because we obviously had to check, number one, for pregnancy. And if I wasn't pregnant and it didn't happen, but if I was, I really don't know how I would have handled that because I'm not pro-life, but I'm not abortion either. It's like I believe that everyone takes on their beliefs and they do what they do. So if I was pregnant, I really don't know what I would have done. I really can't tell you now what I would have done, even in this late of life. I still don't know. I would have had to live that and get an understanding. But what I do know is that I had to go onto antibiotics in case there was any issues in that sort of context. And I had to take those tablets 3 times a day, 1 tablet 3 times a day. And I cried every time I took that because, again, that was the memory coming through.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I do want to stress that I did a lot of crying on it. And I feel that crying helps us release some of that stuff that we're holding on to. So I don't get too concerned about crying. I think it's really good that we do that. And in fact, if I was feeling down and upset, I would go and watch a Suki movie just so I could cry and get that feeling out and move it. So that was one of my areas that helped me move some of that sadness and some of that area. I never experienced any depression from it, so I was really lucky in that way. But yeah, there was always those little bits and pieces that came up, but I didn't have a lot of emotional attachment to it. And I really feel it's because I left the body when it was happening and I didn't have that emotion. Like it just wasn't there. And I honestly feel with all my heart, me going back in and saying, forgive them, Lord, for they know what they've done, enough, I feel that was enough that they would get a learning from it. I don't want to say just desserts and I don't want to say punishment, but I would say I felt that was enough that they would get a learning from it. And I feel intuitively that 2 of them definitely never went that way again. So that hopefully protected a lot of other women. One of them, I would imagine if he is still alive, he would be in jail. He was very, very violent. He was the violent one.
Now, you said you're not religious and you weren't at that point, but you knew those prayers.
Yes.
Did you go to church as a child? Did your parents have a background in religion? Where did the prayer come from? Or was it just put in you?
Yeah, I went when I was in primary school. I did like about a couple of weeks of Sunday school. Did Sunday school. I probably did it for a couple of months. We used to get picked up by our local removalist, and he had the great big removalist truck, and he wouldn't be able to do it nowadays, but we would all jump in the back of the removalist truck and he would drive us to Sunday school and then pick us up and take us home. So there was a big group of us. But my mum's attitude was always, my mother wasn't religious, but her attitude was that she watched her mother get a lot of security and satisfaction and a lot of understanding when she late in her life followed Salvation Army. She joined the Salvation Army. So mum saw her mother get a lot of benefits out of it. And although mum didn't want to do it, she didn't want to restrict out her children. And she wanted her children to have the opportunity to go to a church or go to Sunday school and get an understanding. If we wanted to keep going, we could have. If we didn't have to. But I did take on a strong spiritual belief from it. And I did struggle with the word God for a long, long time until I got a better understanding of it. And now the word God doesn't worry me, but there's a lot of things done in the name of God that is so bad because of different religions. And that's why I tend to steer away from that word, but not that belief.
Yeah, and that's just it. In America and a lot of countries, Salvation Army is just a thrift store now. But I believe it was William Booth and his wife that started the Salvation Army. It was for salvation, for trusting God to save you from hell, so you can have eternity with God and wondrous blessings, right?
Yeah.
So that's excellent. And I'm thinking to myself, so the man who'd come pick you up on for Sunday school, I mean, God used him to teach you those prayers at a young age, and then hopefully he has great reward in eternity, because like you said, that prayer is probably what saved your life.
Absolutely. I didn't like it. They hit me more, but I kept on going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So now, between then and the incident at the bank, you said a year later.
Yeah.
What were the steps you took for healing, or really nothing? You just kind of existed.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, as far as from getting from there to then, I think what really threw me when the second incident happened, when I had that near-death experience, what really threw me was, because it was so close to being 12 months to the day, I started getting this feeling that there was unfinished business there. So what had happened during the attack, there was unfinished business. And so I had another experience, which was the near-death experience. And honestly, I was not sick, nothing. All of a sudden, it just went bang, just went down. I was in the bank. Next door was a doctor's surgery. They called a doctor across, and he gave me adrenaline shot to bring me back. So, so there was no reason for me to actually collapse or do anything. It just happened. But as far as the healing between the attack, I really don't know what I did. I really don't know what I did. I guess I did more prayer work and what I call prayer is asking the question. I call prayer as in asking the question, meditation as receiving the answers, and visualization as it creating a future. So I sort of see that as a bit of a cycle. So you pray or you ask the question, and then you need to receive the answer. And if you're quiet in meditation or in whatever you would like to call meditation, you will receive the answer. And we get that very, very quickly. And again, I refer it to intuition, that because intuition, let me just explain what I see intuition as too, because this will make a little bit more sense. Intuition for me is the communication between the spiritual body and the physical body. They need to communicate, because we come into this as a spirit, we come into this body. The spirit has the agenda, the body has to keep going until that agenda is done or we move on. So you can imagine the spirit is trying to steer this physical body one way, shape, or form because it needs to achieve something.
Yeah. And so now when you had this episode too at the bank, going back, I want to track and continue this thought. And I love how you talked about prayer and meditation and visualization. Praying's talking to God, meditation's listening. And how did you describe visualization?
Visualization is when we actually start to create our future.
To create. Yes. Okay. Creation.
So you know what to ask for. Yeah.
So no, I know it was a different day and age. And I know even just, when you and I grew up, we're just tougher people. It seems like everybody now, it's like you stub your toe, you go to the ER. It's like, come on, the ER is for an emergency, not for stubbing your toe. Right. But you had literally, you got hit with adrenaline, which is serious to inject in someone's system. Did they even take you to the doctor afterwards and diagnose what happened? They just say, go home, you'll be fine, drink some water.
And I drove home by myself.
Yeah.
I had lost my bladder.
Days.
I had lost my bladder. And so I remember just saying to one of the staff, please walk behind me so people can't see that I've wet myself. And I got in the car and I drove home.
Yeah.
You just would not be allowed to do that nowadays.
Yeah, no. And it's just a different world. And you never had another instance after that?
No.
So do you think maybe, and I'm spitballing here.
Yeah.
Do you think it was a freak virus, or do you think it was the 1-year anniversary, and whether it was conscious or subconscious, you just built up a lot of anxiety and it just shut your body down? Like, do you think that's a possibility? Was it a freak instance?
If I felt anxious and things like that, I'm pretty good at reflecting. I'm pretty good at going there and looking deep. If I felt it was something else, I would have said, yeah, it was a virus, or it could have been this, but there was no indication. There was nothing at all that would give me any idea that there was something else playing on the physical realm. Nothing at all. It was, and I mean, even coming up to the 1st-year anniversary after the attack, I didn't even know that until later on. So it wasn't because after that had happened, I ended up staying at home for a week or so. And that gave me time to reflect as well. And it wasn't until then that I went, it's been a year now since it happened. So it wasn't even on the day, and I wasn't even thinking of the build up to it. So I don't feel I had any anxiety, but I do remember thinking what I'd experienced wasn't finished, and that doesn't quite sound right, but I didn't get all the understanding in the attack because we get caught up in it all. The learning that I needed from it, I didn't feel I got it all, and that's why it happened so soon, within 12 months, that the next experience happened. And it was then that I went, okay, this is weird. Now that's one weird thing that happened to me during attack, and this is another weird thing that's happened. So it started to create that, okay, I've got two things going on here. It's not just a one-off thing that's happened. Something strange is going on. I don't know what it is. And it was probably another 10 odd years later that I started actually researching, doing study, not researching on that, because I really didn't think it was anything. But I started learning or researching about personal development, about intuition, about spirituality. I started to do some different things like that. The reason why I went to there, I guess my next part of the story, is that I had got married. I had 3 children in 3 years. Then I worked out what was causing it and stopped. So
3 children in 3 years, Irish twins. It's triplets.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, that was a little bit okay. That's enough. But after my third child, she was about 6 months old, and I was quite emotional with things happening around me, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you've got postnatal depression," and I'm thinking, okay, I cry, but I didn't feel depressed. And it was like people kept on saying, and because you're getting hounded by people saying there's something wrong with you, you've got this, you've got that. And I'm thinking, I know I'm sad, I know I'm upset, but I feel connected to my child. I don't feel that it's this depression that you're talking about. It's not happening all the time, but it's happening a lot. So there was a lot of questions and things I didn't understand. Anyway, so what had happened was that my ex-husband, got sick of me, obviously, because I was trying to deal with 3 children under the age of 3, and dumped me outside a doctor's surgery and said, basically, get something for it. And, like I said, I didn't know I was broken. So I never went to the doctors. I very, very rarely went to the doctors. So I didn't know I was broken, didn't know I needed fixing. And I've gone into the doctor's surgery, and there was a new lady doctor in town. She was new to the surgery. She did alternate medicines as well. So she did acupuncture and different other alternate medicines. And she had a space. So I went straight in. And now this is synchronicity. This is what's going on here. So I've gone straight in, and I'm a blubbering mess, because she sort of said to me, "Why you're here?" And I went, "I don't know. I don't know why I'm here." And I was in tears. I was a mess. I said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with me, but I don't know I'm here." And my husband said, "I have to get something for it. And I don't like taking tablets. And I don't, I said, I don't know what's wrong with me." So we went through the regular, chatting, and she's writing down notes and getting an understanding of it. Anyway, in the end, she printed out a prescription for Valium. That was the drug of choice in those days. So there was a prescription for Valium and another note. And she said to me, "Okay, with everything you've said, you've got 2 choices. You take control of your life. You've got 2 choices. You can take the prescription for Valium, and that will help you with that." She said, "Otherwise, I've got a list of books here you can read and see if that will help you. If the books don't help you, come back. I've still got the script for you. So you have the choice. You take control of your life." So you've got to remember, I had 3 children under the age of 3. I lived 2 states away from my family. I had no family members close by. I had an alcoholic husband who liked to drink, and he did that every night. And I had no support. So I needed to take the easiest route for me. I needed to take the easiest way because I had so much going on. I had to do that. So I grabbed the list of books and I walked out of the surgery. Now, my ex-husband was absolutely disgusted that the doctor gave me a list of books, but I went and got the books. Now, I knew to get onto Valium, the hardest thing about Valium was getting off it. And I didn't want to be there. I just did not. I thought, I'm going through enough crap now. I don't want to be able to have to wean off of a drug. So my choice then was to grab the books. I went down to the local bookstore, and there was one book there I got, which was called Creative Visualization by Jacques Diguin. That was my first book. And that's when I first started all my spiritual work, my self-development, all that sort of side to it. That's when I started to test theories. So I tested theory. I tested Jacques Diguin's Creative Visualization. $85,000 later, it worked. So I tested all these books. I tested this understanding. There was one called The Dance of Anger. That was an amazing book. And that's really good for empaths who are living with narcissists, which is what I was doing. So this book taught you how to dance with do the dance of anger and not allow yourself to be manipulated to go dancing one way when you wanted to stay here. So that was a really good lesson. That is one of the ones I'd love to go back in and explain that one a bit more. But Yeah, I was living with a narcissist, an alcoholic narcissist. I was being emotionally manipulated, which is consequently why all the tears. Never good enough. Self-worth went right down the gutter and into the sewerage. But yeah, that was my first step. And because of the books, and of course, I wasn't allowed to buy any more books. So I'd go to the library and hire 10 books at a time. And I'd start reading them. And that's when I learned about the near-death experience. So,
And then as you're learning and as you're growing, you're still being a mom, you're still taking care of the everyday life. I'm guessing you got further and further. The ex as a narcissist was probably getting more angry and more distant. Is that correct?
absolutely. But
Yeah,
from that,
they don't like when you're healing.
no, they don't like you changing. One of the things was when we did eventually split up, and he goes, well, this is all your fault because you changed. And I went, absolutely. Happy to take that on. Definitely my fault. I changed. I met you when I was 21. I am now 45 or whatever it was. If I hadn't changed in that period of time, there'd be something wrong with me. Because we have to change. That's what life's all about.
Yeah.
So yes,
growing.
that was one of them. But from that time that I got that book, the first book from the doctor, within 18 months, going from everyone telling me I've got postnatal depression, in an 18-month period, I was nominated for Australian Citizen of the Year in our local area.
Nice.
So, you got this energy, like my energy was all coming out in tears and emotions, but I started using that emotional energy to help the community and start to do different things. And then, yeah, start to get the rewards for it.
And then where does your life go from there now?
So my relationship, I had a 20-year marriage. One of the things about my relationship is I didn't want to let it go. I wasn't going to let my marriage go. Yes, an empath and a narcissist are not a good combination, but I married for life. That was my attitude. And so that's where I was going. But I remember thinking, okay, now there's love, want, and need. Now, do I still love him? Yes, I do. Yep, that's cool. Do I still want him? And there was a want that just sort of started to drop. The want started to drop, but I still needed him because he was still the father of my children. So I still needed him in those sort of ways. And that was when I went, okay, well, let's change things up a bit. I wanted to move on to the farm. So we ended up going onto a 90-acre organic crop farm. And I loved the farm. The farming life was my life. I just loved it. I had my own little four-wheel drive tractor. He had his and her tractors, all sorts of stuff. And I remember being on the farm and thinking, that's when I still need him. The want was starting to really wane because I didn't want to be emotionally manipulated anymore. I didn't want that sort of side to it, but I felt I still loved him and I felt I still needed him. We were 8 years on the farm, and then the drought ended up, we had to sell it. We moved into town. And when we moved into town, I asked the question again, love, want, need. The want had gone for sure by then. And the need, because we'd sold the farm, the need was no longer there. I was working full time. He wasn't working. I was keeping the house running and everything else. The children at that stage were young adults, and two of them had moved off into their own lives. And the youngest one was, because I had 3 and 3 years, they went pretty quick. The youngest one was heading off to university. And, so I went through, I didn't need him anymore, but did I still love him? And I thought, yes, I still loved him. And a couple of years went by again. And then I again asked the question again. I knew the want had definitely gone. At that stage, we weren't even sleeping together. The need wasn't there. I was self-sufficient in doing what I was doing. And then I asked, do I love him? And I remember thinking, I blamed everything on the alcohol. I remember blaming his drinking for the world falling apart. But I thought to myself, if he stopped drinking, would I still love him? Because I'd only ever known him to be that way. And I thought to myself, I don't know whether I would or not. And that's when I knew that the love had gone. And that's when the relationship basically finished.
And then from that point in your life, what was the transition like, especially with 3 kids and they're looking back? Did they understand? Did they see what was going on, or were they caught off guard?
Well, I found out later on, my youngest one said, Mum, you should have done it years ago, because she could see that, it was a very one-sided relationship. But when it did happen, my son didn't say a lot. My eldest daughter was in the same type of relationship, so she didn't have a big choice, but she was actually working with my ex-husband. So she didn't talk to me for 18 months. She'd had a baby and everything, and she just didn't talk to me for that period of time. Since then, we've got a wonderful relationship now. But it was really, really tough. If anyone's going through anything like that, you have to allow other people to go through it the way they've got to go through it. I couldn't tell my daughter what she could or couldn't do by that stage. She had children of her own by then. I couldn't tell my son, what to do or anything else. It's allowing them to go through it the way they needed to go through it. And if I could help, if I could ease anything, if they wanted me there to talk to, I was always available. But it was shit. It was horrible. I hated leaving my relationship. I hated it. But
Yeah.
I couldn't survive in it.
And then once you left, what's the path that your life took between then and today?
It took a very different trajectory. I actually, at the age of 48, went back to university and studied. So I had my own business house, because I bought him out of the house, had my business and my house, and obviously the family all in that one area. I put a renter in my home. I put a manager in my business, and I had to leave my children. And that's when I went down to the Gold Coast. So the only way I could do uni was to have somebody renting my home to pay for it. And then I took on a little granny flat on the Gold Coast, and I did uni there. Worked 3 part-time jobs while I was doing that, and I put myself through uni and did a public health degree, all about pandemics, would you believe? And of course, when I finished my degree, 6 months after I finished my public health degree, they wiped out all the jobs. The government wiped out all the jobs in the public health industry because they don't have pandemics. There's no such thing as them. So
and what year is this? What year was that roughly?
This was year 2011.
2011. Wait till they meet Tony Fauci. Yeah.
So I dropped everything, come down to the Gold Coast to study and reinvent my life, and I couldn't get a job. So I'd had this $30,000 debt, no job, left my kids, left my business, left my house, and I had nothing. So that's when I had to, again, reinvent. I thought I was reinventing myself as a, public health worker. With health promotion, I was promoting health. And instead, I had to reinvent myself in a completely different way. University was great because it gave me a lot more confidence. It really gave me the understanding of computers and the confidence with software and different things like that. So I just got a lower paying job just as a receptionist to keep me going. And then I wrote my book. So I started writing a book all about personal development, about intuition, and went along those lines. So I've got my little business going on over here, which is my retirement business. And I still work. I still work part-time now as a digital marketer.
Very nice. Very nice. So if you're talking, let's first off, before I hit this, between your birth and today, is there anything else we missed that you want to cover before I ask some questions? And then we transition to where is Susan today and where are you heading?
Oh, okay. No, I talked about the farm, the university. No, I think that sort of covers off most of it.
All right, cool. So then let's do this. You've learned a lot. You've grown a lot. You've experienced a lot. You're talking to women, young, middle-aged, old. They've been raped as well, but maybe they didn't handle it as well. They're going through it now. They don't know what to do. What advice do you have for them, steps to help them work through this?
If they've not talked about it now, after and a period of time has passed, there's a different way to approach it. So it is going to be coming up in their lives in different ways. So if it's coming up in a relationship situation where you just don't want to have sex anymore or something like that, it's going to be coming up. Or you keep on going into the same type of relationships that are toxic, because you haven't dealt with it. So it is going to be coming out in different ways. And that's a given. If you don't deal with it, it's going to come out in different ways. And what's really, really hard is getting an understanding of how it is coming out, because you may see it may be coming out as anger. Like I said, that's that emotion side of it. It's coming out as anger, but the feeling is self-worth. Feeling is, not good enough. I can't do this. And because you're feeling that, you take it out as anger. You're using a different sort of emotion to represent that feeling. So to start with, you may not even be aware that the attack, the rape that you've experienced, the child sex abuse that you've experienced, anything like that, you may not be aware of how it is actually coming out in your life now. And this is where we can start to go to different modalities that suit you. And I feel that with all my spiritual work that I started doing, I feel that is how I got through mine. So church is one thing. A lot of people get a lot of goodness out of church. If that's where you need to go, if that's going to help you, do that. A lot of people will get more benefit out of card readings. That gives them that aha moment. It gives them an understanding. Some people want to do life coaching and go deeper in there. Some will want to go to a psychologist. Some will want to go to a hypnotherapist. There's no right or wrong. The only wrong is that you're not doing something about it. The right is that you're having a go at doing it. I worked with a lady who had a lot of stuff going on in her life, and constant. Now, I would give her the time of day because I could see she was working on it. There was a lot of people that say, oh, give up with her. She's hopeless, rah, rah, rah. She's not going to do it, and all the rest of it. But I could see that this woman was having a go. And she was testing different areas and getting an understanding, does that suit her? Does that not suit her? She wasn't staying in that victimhood constantly. She did stay there a lot, though. But you could see she was having a go and trying to move. And that is, to me, is the biggest thing anyone can do in any situation, whether it's a rape, attack, whatever it is don't just sit it to the back and say that happened. Do the work. So when I was doing my spiritual stuff, we used to I used to call it holistic health days. I was a health promotion person, so I used to call it holistic health days. And I would get ask all the healers around. Now, whether they worked with crystals, whether they worked with, cards, whether they worked with EFT, you're tapping, all these different modalities. It didn't matter what they worked with, but they came together so other people could come in and try them. Not have a big session, not pay $500,000 or $600,000, whatever it is, but just come in and have a test. Pay $50, pay $20, whatever it was. Come in and test this modality and see if it suits you. See if something can be released. See if something can be moved. So there's that element of it. The other element that I did, and that I highly recommend, if you don't know where to go and what to do, even if you do, go back to what I was saying before. Ask. If it's in prayer, ask in prayer, whatever it is. Even if it's one of those questions where you say, oh, what the, and you're yelling and screaming, give me some answers. I'm sick of this. Give me some, I need some answers. Even if you're doing it angrily, you're asking for help. You're asking for an answer. We all have free will. If we don't ask, we don't get it. So ask, do it in prayer, do it in meditate, do it however you want to do it. Allow yourself the time to receive that information, and you're going to receive it in lots of different ways. This is my little expertise, because that's intuition. You're receiving those intuitive messages. So you'll receive that. And then the last one, like I said, that's that visualization. Start seeing your life a little bit differently. So did I answer that question? Sorry, David.
No, yeah, you answered it great. I mean, we're just trying to look at how we can help people hurting on their path to healing. So no,
Yes.
I think that was excellent. So when people are listening to this, especially the out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, those are things that most people don't experience. And then when they hear about them, they don't know what to make. And I'll be honest with you, I don't disbelieve you and I don't believe you. I mean, I don't want to say that sounds bad. I don't know what to think, because I try to filter everything through the Bible, and I try to filter everything through a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some clear boundaries that the Bible talks about. This is how life is, this is how eternity is. This is how, things happen in certain areas. But then there's areas just not discussed, at least I haven't seen, right? Like I haven't realized it in the Bible. So when you're talking about this, I'm intrigued because I've never experienced it and I don't doubt it. I don't think it's not true. Like the only thing I'd question is like thinking Satan. I don't think that was Satan, or he might have came to you, but I don't think he had good intentions. God just used the evil for good, right?
Absolutely. It was just the vision. It wasn't the truth.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is like all things work together for good to them that love God, to those who called according to his purpose. So I don't think Satan will ever do a good thing. And I know God will never do a bad thing. So that was the only thing you said that I'd be like, no, I don't think that's right. But everything else, I'm intrigued. So you said you had 2 out-of-body experiences, which makes sense. You separated from the body to protect yourself. Then you were dying and it separated, and they're like, no, it's not your time. You went back. And then that third time you kind of had control over it, or you stimulated it through practice. Do you still have out-of-body experiences, or was it isolated to those 3?
No, I don't. When I said to you with that near, like the near, what I call the near-death experience, why I said it felt like I hadn't achieved what I needed to achieve in the attack. I hadn't got the learning from it. And then I had this next one. I believe now I needed to get that understanding, because I'm a theory tester. I needed to get the understanding that we do have a physical body and a spiritual body, or the spiritual side and a physical side.
Yeah, body, soul, spirit.
And I needed to, because you can hear them, you can read it. I needed to experience it. Yep. And it wasn't until I did that I started to go, okay, there's something else to this. There's something else happening here. And even when we talk about eternal life, I see that as the spirit side. I can see it quite clearly. That's it. Our eternal life is our spirit side. The physical side, obviously, is the when you think about a spirit doesn't have the 5 physical senses. So for spirit to understand what you're experiencing, it has to come into a body. It has to come into a body. Otherwise, it's not going to feel as we feel. It's not going to be able to touch. It's not going to be able to see as we see. And one of the things that I noticed when I went on this near-death experience is the fact that I'm explaining it to you in a visual context, but it wasn't visual. Mm-hmm. It was that knowing that you just knew that's what it was, but you didn't see it. Even the colors and the sound, you can't describe it too much. And I don't mean to be fluffing around. I do apologize for that, but it's so hard to explain. And the only way you can do that is in a visual context. Explain that's what it seemed like, but you don't see it that way. So spirit doesn't have emotions, because that's the external part of it. Spirit has feelings, but not emotions.
Yeah, and I can understand some of that, because like in the Bible, I believe it's in Corinthians, it talks about how there's invisible things of the world. And actually it kind of leads you to believe there's more battle in the spiritual realm than there is in the physical realm.
Yeah.
And then when you're talking about, one of the apostles, when God gave him a vision of the kingdom of heaven, and he's like, I could barely describe it because it's just not words. So again, I don't question anything you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest and real. I don't understand. So thank you for being so transparent, Susan, and helping us through it. Now let's ask the question.
Again, I think I needed to see it so I could talk about it, because I wouldn't talk about it unless I felt. I'm very analytical, would you believe? So it needs to make sense to me before I can talk about it. So yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, awesome. So let's do this. Where is Susan today, and where are you heading? How can we help you get there? And how can our community reach out to you if they want to learn more, continue the conversation, pick up your book?
Yep. Well, I am, like I said, I work part-time. So I still do a bit of part-time, because I'm heading towards retirement. And retirement, part-time work, I do digital marketing. That's my work. My passion, obviously, is intuition and all things like that. Now, my book I have is called Intuitive Flowers. That's in Empowering Your Emotional Goals. What I did with how I came through all this and the understandings of it, I would get learnings from different books and different areas. I looked into tarot cards and oracle cards and things like that, and they're fine. They're great if that's where you want to float your boat. They're okay, but I find them really restricting. We are all so individual and so different. Why would a deck of cards be able to guide you along the way? And I have to sort of say, like, it's just a little bit, they're obviously very generic, or they're not really giving you the details that you need. And that's when I started to look at images and intuition. So we're getting intuitive messages all the time. They're coming to us all the time, and it's us listening to them. There was a situation with my partner just recently. We were talking about something, and then we're driving down the M1, down the main highway, and he saw this big billboard on the side of the road. And billboards are pretty big, so you would see that. And as we've gone past, he goes, "Oh, wow, did you see that billboard? It's had on it exactly what we were talking about before." And I went, "Oh, no, I didn't see it." Like, who doesn't see a billboard? We're driving down a bit further. He's driving, we're going down a bit further. And then I've gone to him, "Oh, my goodness, did you hear that on the radio? Those guys were talking about what we were talking about." And he goes, "No, I didn't hear it." Now, both of us were in the car together. He didn't hear what the radio was saying. I didn't see this bloody great big billboard go past. And that is how our intuition is working. That's how that spirit is working. He needed to see something. I needed to hear it. And it allows, those intuitive messages are directing your gaze one way, so you see something. They're directing your different areas of you, so you see things and you do things. And that's how we get those messages, those intuitive messages. I went one step further and went, well, what if we're getting all these messages, and messages are everywhere? What if we take a snapshot and get an understanding of it? Get a true understanding of what our intuition is trying to guide us towards, what our spirit does, giving those intuitive messages. So, in other words, where God wants us to go. And that's when I started to go, okay, what can we do? How can we do this? I want to be not restricted in any way, shape, or form. I want to be open to the world. And that's when I started doing the flowers. When we look at a flower is our goal in life. It is a goal in life. So if I said to you, okay, you've got a goal there, say you want a relationship, You're trying to work on your relationship, and you want to know what your spirit, what intuition is telling you, how to achieve that emotional goal, because it's got to be emotional, not just a smart goal. It's got to have that emotional attachment. And then you go, okay, that's fine. And I say to you, okay, so you know how you want to feel when you're in this relationship? You know what that feels like? You know where you want to be? You know what it's like? What would that look like as a flower? And you choose a flower. And because we've got Google nowadays, you could Google that flower. And if I said to you, think of a red rose, and you Googled red rose, you could imagine how many millions of red roses would come up. And some of them are going to be full bloom. Some of them are going to be a bud. Some of them are going to have multiple flowers on them. Some of them are going to be single. And whatever image you choose, because it's attached to that emotion that you've got, whatever image you choose, your intuition is telling you there's 16 different elements in that flower image that your intuition has chosen and is trying to guide you towards.
Okay, so let's stop there, because there's guys like me who are very black and white, very concrete, have a hard time connecting emotion. It's just facts. And I truly believe in energy and like God made things. You reap what you sow. Like some people call it the law of attraction. There's all different terminology for it, the secret. But I do believe energy is God and he created it. I believe that you can visualize and draw that in, but I've always had a hard time with connecting the emotion to it. Do you have any tips for men and women like me who have a hard time connecting emotion to their feelings or feeling their thoughts?
Yeah. Okay. So this is almost like that creative visualization, that visualization where we're going forward in our life. What we need to do is for example, David, when you have a good podcast host, guest, and you get off of that show, you finish it off, you've been talking for who knows how long, and you get off that and you sort of go, wow, that was really good. Or, oh, that one was a bit challenging. That was a bit hard. I had to really work with that one. You've got a feeling there straight away. Now, when I say to you, so can you imagine those feelings? Can you just not?
Yeah, I don't know if this makes sense, but I guess what I quote unquote feel is like in my head. I don't feel it in my chest or in my body. It's all in my head. And if things are positive, it's like happy and light. And if things are bad, it's like heavy and tiresome.
Okay.
That's the extent of my emotion.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say that's the extent, but that's how you're feeling it.
That's how I'm feeling it. Yeah, at least I guess, like, I don't know. It's like sometimes I'd literally, like, I'd rather deal with things and physically get in a fist fight than have to try to feel something. It's like, it's just the connection's not there. It's so frustrating.
But frustrating is still an emotion.
Yeah, I guess so. It's not a good emotion. All right, so let's reframe the question. How do I feel joy?
Well, I mean, you're already feeling it when you're laughing and you're experiencing it, but it's also light. You know joy, that how you understand it. And remember when I was saying there's a feeling and then there's the emotion, how you're feeling it, and you are feeling it, you're feeling light. You're feeling bright. You're feeling uplifted. You're feeling that way inclined. That is your spiritual side of it. You may not be doing the physical side of it where you go, oh, I'm feeling bright, so I'm going to bounce around on the clouds of life. You may not be emotionally showing that action side of it, but you are feeling it. And if you may not have gone in very deep, and women do tend to go a lot deeper into their feelings, and they want to go, well, is this sort of feeling, or is this sort of feeling? Whereas you're going, if it's good, if it's a positive one, I feel light. I feel bright. I feel better. I may have a bit more of a bounce in my step. I may be feeling, not so, when we're feeling down, we start to do the shoulders, get around our ears, and, we start to crunch up and we start to feel differently. When you're feeling better, when you're feeling joy, it's light. Joy is a feeling that you may experience at a peak very quickly and drop again, because in general, you're sitting at that mediocre level. And so you'll get your joys as peaks. There's other people that get the big peaks and troughs. And that can be really challenging, because that is hard. Whereas if you're sitting in this and I don't mean mediocre in a bad way, I mean in a general life form, if we're sitting in this middle, which is where I feel I sit, and there's times when days are good and maybe not over the top good, because I'm more of an introvert. So I'm not one of these people that will, go off the trolley. I'm not one of those type of people. So I'm not going to have those extremes. I'm going to be sitting in this mediocre area because I like that area. And that's probably where you're sitting, in this area. So when you're feeling good, you feel light. When you're not feeling as good, you feel dark. And if that's how you're assessing your emotions, then it's right. It's yours. You own it.
Okay. So it's just like anything else. We're all made differently. So someone else may feel that elation, and I'm not wrong. If I don't feel it, it's just I'm different.
Exactly. You don't need to have that as high. And you will see it in extroverted people. They are extroverted. They're always going for that big high, whereas introverted people don't have to go so high. We go in, not out. So extroverted has to bring it out there, and the world's wonderful and all the rest of it. Introverted will go, oh yeah, having a good day. Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. So now if somebody wants to continue the conversation with you, Susan, or connect or learn more about you, what's the best way to reach you?
My website is intuitivenature.com.au. So it's an Australian business. So intuitivenature.com.au. You can catch me on there. I do run my own podcast, which is The Voice of Intuition. So I run that one. And I'm on all the socials under Susan Jane. Under TikToks, you can get free flower readings, daily flower readings to help you feel lighter. So we get those little ones there, what to focus on for the day, what to look at. So very, very general, but I'm the type of person that like I said, everyone's different. And so if what I do doesn't suit you, so be it, but have a listen, have a look, and then, do your thing.
Awesome. Well, it's been fantastic to talk to you today, Susan. And between your birth and today and where you're heading, is there anything we missed or any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with before we close the episode?
I would just like everyone to be aware that those intuitive messages they're receiving them for a reason. It's taking them on a different path that they may be going on, and it's not necessarily the bad path. So when you're looking at things and you sort of go, it doesn't feel right, listen to that. You may not know what is right, but if something, often it's that negative that comes in first that gives you the understanding that something doesn't feel right. You may not be always following the bright, shiny light, say, wow, that feels good, I'm going to do that. Often it's like, there's something going on here. It doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right. Pay attention to that. You don't have to find the answer. You need to just be aware.
Very well said. And thank you, Susan. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you caught Susan, she said you can check her on social media, her website, her podcast. We'll put all the links in the show notes so you have them again. Also, don't forget, like our slogan says, don't just listen to a great podcast, but do the good you know you need to do. Repeat it each day so you can have a great life in this world and, more importantly, in eternity to come. So, Susan, thank you again for being on the show. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, David.
Oh, it's all our pleasure, and we thank you again for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, like the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, check out our website, and share this with your friends. Not so we just get popular, but so people are helped and they can grow and be encouraged, thrive in life, and we make the world a better place. Our show has two goals: to glorify God and to help you grow. That's it. So tell your friends, share it, like it, shoot Susan an email and let her know if it helped you, and shoot me an email. If anything we can do to make the podcast better, let us know. But if not, check out another episode until the new release next week. I'm David Pasqualone. This was Susan Jane. Thanks for watching the Remarkable People Podcast. Ciao.
The Remarkable People Podcast. Check it out. The Remarkable People Podcast. Listen, do, repeat. For life. The Remarkable People Podcast.